Good evening, dear listener. I'm Selene. Tonight, we step quietly into the frozen past, where the air was sharp enough to bite skin, and survival depended on skill, instinct, and the smallest flicker of flame. Whether you're curled deep beneath your blankets or resting somewhere quiet with only the hum of the night for company, I'm glad you're here. If you're new, feel free to stay. There are many more nights like this to share. Tonight, we drift backward through drifting snow, through the creak of wooden doors and the hiss of wind against log walls, to a time when families faced the wilderness with nothing but their hands, their grit, and their knowledge. Imagine this isn't just any door. This is a magic door, a simple, worn frontier cabin door. And when you open it, you don't step onto your porch. You step into the year 1880, into the heart of one of the coldest winters the American frontier had ever known. There is no furnace, no electric hum, no modern insulation in the walls. Out there, winter nights bring a simple choice: stay warm or die. The temperature can fall to -30 in hours. Wind knives through the cracks in the cabin as if the walls were made of paper. One fire allowed to go out too soon, one overlooked draft, and a family could be gone before dawn. The families who made it through these nights understood heat not as comfort, but as life itself. They knew how to trap it, how to store it, and how to make it last until the pale blue light of morning. In the Morrison cabin, the fire has been burning for 6 hours. The glow from the stone hearth spilling across the room, glinting on frost-lined window panes. Thomas Morrison crouches low, adding a fresh split log, feeling the heat rise against his face, even as the wind outside wails at 25 below. Behind him, Sarah moves softly, adjusting thick quilts over their 2 children. In each bed, warmed river stones wrapped in cloth rest at their feet, radiating heat absorbed from the fire earlier in the evening. Every step, every movement is part of a plan, an unwritten protocol for survival that frontier families lived by. The great stone fireplace isn't luck. It is engineering, built into the cabin's very bones to absorb heat through the day and release it slowly into the night. Outside, the darkness deepens, the sound of the wind wrapping itself around the cabin like a predator circling its prey. Inside, every seam in the walls has been stuffed with moss and rags, every window edge sealed with beeswax to keep the warmth in. The children breathe softly, unaware of the cold's persistent hunger. The parents remain alert, watching the fire as if it were a living thing that needed tending. This is not just comfort. It is survival. And in this moment, with the snow rising against the door and the world outside frozen to its core, the cabin holds steady against the dark. The family will see the morning. And now, dear listener, as the glow of that fire flickers in your mind, let your own world fall still. Imagine the warmth settling around you, the quiet creak of wood in the heat, the soft breathing of loved ones close by. But not just any fire would do. In the frozen stillness of the frontier, where the wind could strip warmth from a cabin in minutes, a heating system had to be more than a simple blaze. It had to burn steadily for 12 hours or more, send its warmth evenly into the room, and do it without poisoning the air or setting the home alight. The difference between a good fireplace and a great one was often measured in lives. The families who endured understood this, and they built their hearths with a craftsman's precision. The fireplace was the heart of the cabin, often massive, made from stone or brick that had been hauled and shaped by hand. The firebox was deep, big enough to hold logs up to 4 feet long. Its angled sides reflected heat back into the room instead of letting it escape up the chimney. The back wall often leaned forward, pushing warmth toward the living space, so even those far from the flames could feel its steady comfort. The chimney was more than a vent. It was a carefully tuned machine. A damper system inside allowed control over airflow and heat retention. Open it wide, and the fire would roar, sending a rush of heat and sparks up the flue. Close it too much, and smoke would creep back inside. The balance had to be exact. And then there was the genius of thermal mass. Every stone, every brick was part of a silent battery, absorbing heat during the fire's peak and releasing it long after the flames died. Some families took this further, building stone heat sinks that extended into the room. Long, low walls that stayed warm through the night, radiating heat like the last glow of the setting sun. But no fireplace, no matter how perfectly built, could survive the winter without the right fuel. Months before the first frost, men and women began the long work of preparing wood. Oak, hickory, and maple were prized, for they burned hotter and longer, creating the dense coal beds needed for overnight warmth. In spring, the wood was cut and split, then stacked in open, airy piles to dry through summer and early autumn. By winter, it was lighter to lift, its ends cracked from shrinking, and when struck together, it rang with a hollow sound that told experienced hands it was ready. The fire was loaded with care, each piece of wood part of a plan. Large logs went to the back of the firebox, their slow burn providing a steady backbone of heat. Medium splits were placed before them for maintaining temperature, while kindling and small sticks sat at the front, ready to flare up when more warmth was needed quickly. At the heart of it all was the coal bed, a glowing layer of embers that could spark new wood instantly. Maintaining that bed was an art. Too much air, and the fire would burn away in hours, leaving only cold ash before dawn. Too little, and the wood would smolder without heat, filling the cabin with smoke. The best fire burned hot and clean, with the damper adjusted just enough to slow the flames without starving them. Overnight burns were the greatest test. As evening fell, the family would bank the fire, loading it with large hardwood logs, drawing the damper nearly closed and covering the coals in a soft layer of ash. Slowly, through the black hours, the fire would shrink and settle into a deep, steady glow, giving heat without flame until the first light of morning. When the family stirred, a single breath of air and a stick of kindling could bring the blaze roaring back to life. And so the night would be survived, not with luck, but with skill passed down through generations. And now, dear listener, as you picture the orange glow flickering against rough-hewn logs feel the same calm that warmed those frontier cabins. Outside, the wind may rise, but inside, your fire burns steady. The air is still, and every stone around you holds the day's warmth. Close your eyes now. Let the imagined heat soak into your skin. You're safe here. The fire will not go out. The night is long, but so is the warmth. Sleep well until the first soft light of dawn comes to wake you. Now, if you mind, a properly banked fire, if tended with care, would greet the morning with a quiet heart of glowing coals, ready to be coaxed back to life with a breath of fresh air and a small handful of kindling. In the deep hours of the night, the heat was not left to chance. It was guided. Families arranged their homes with intention, placing large stones where they would drink in the day's fire, only to give it back slowly when the darkness came. Some stones were kept in the fire itself during the daylight hours, then carried carefully to the corners of the room or tucked into the foot of beds, wrapped in cloth, to radiate warmth until morning. Many cabins had clever heat sinks, built of stone or brick directly connected to the fireplace, absorbing the day's energy and releasing it in a steady stream long after the flames dimmed. The fireplace was not only the heart of heat, but the heart of the kitchen. Families used the same fire that kept them alive to prepare the food that gave them strength. Large hearths were built to hold iron cooking pots on swing arms, while smaller side chambers acted as baking ovens, their heat drawn directly from the main blaze. Every log mattered, and every ember had a purpose. In years when fuel was scarce, efficiency was not convenience. It was survival. A good fire is like a good friend. It keeps you warm all night and is still there in the morning. Mary Austen wrote in her diary during the winter of 1883. Her words were truth, learned by necessity. Safety, too, was constant work. Water barrels sat within reach of the hearth, ready for the unthinkable. Chimneys were cleaned, often to prevent creosote buildup that could turn warmth into wildfire. Children learned young how to move cautiously near flame, how to bank a fire without snuffing it out, and how to act should the fire leap where it should not. In the cold months, a house fire could mean death before morning. Every family knew it. Some households kept backup heat for the worst nights. Small stoves in sleeping quarters, portable braziers filled with hot coals, or even a secondary fireplace built in the far end of the home. These were not luxuries. They were insurance against a fire gone cold or a wind too sharp for one hearth to hold back. And yet, all the fire in the world would not last long without the quiet partner of insulation. In Sarah Morrison's cabin, the walls themselves seemed to breathe warmth. She could run her hand along the smooth inner logs, and though the air outside had plunged to 30 degrees below zero, the surface was only cool, not cold. Between those walls lay the secret. Double wall construction, with a wide cavity filled with the forest's gifts. 6 to 8 inches of space between outer and inner logs created room for insulation thick enough to rival anything made in the cities. In late summer, the Morrisons had gathered spongy sphagnum moss from the wet edges of the forest, drying it carefully until it was light and springy. Packed tightly between the logs, the moss trapped countless pockets of air, each one a barrier against the winter's bite. Animal hair was saved too, the coarse hair from butchered cattle, the soft fur of trapped game, even the clippings from family haircuts, mixed into the moss to add density and warmth. When possible, feathers from ducks and geese were added, lending the kind of insulating power now found in fine down quilts. Outside, the chinking, clay mixed with mud, was pressed deep into every gap, sealing out the wind completely. This was no casual patchwork. It was a handmade thermal wall, built to hold warmth, like a cupped hand holds water. With fire banked and walls sealed, the cabin could hold an interior temperature 60 or 70 degrees warmer than the frozen air outside. And in that careful balance between flame and stone, between wood and moss, life endured. Now, dear listener, imagine the fire's soft glow painting the walls in shades of gold and ember. Outside, the wind may scrape across the logs, but here it cannot touch you. You are wrapped in the same quiet security that kept generations safe through winters far colder than this. Let the imagined heat seep into your bones. Let your shoulders grow heavy, and let your breath match the slow, steady rhythm of a fire that will not go out. The night is long, but you are warm. The storm may rage beyond the walls, but here inside, there is only peace. Also, the chinking between the cabin logs was more than just filler. It was a lifeline. Mixed with animal hair or chopped straw to prevent cracking, it was applied in multiple layers, each one pressed deep into the seams to seal out the cutting wind. Over the course of a winter, it was checked again and again, repaired wherever frost or shifting timbers had opened a gap. The floor beneath was as carefully considered as the walls. Raised floors allowed a crawl space to be packed with insulating materials, dried leaves, straw, even animal bedding, all of it forming a thick, barrier against the creeping cold of the ground. In some homes, families kept a few chickens beneath the floor, their small bodies radiating just enough warmth to take the edge off the chill above. Every opening was fortified. At night, heavy wool blankets or thick furs were hung over windows, turning fragile glass panes into walls of warmth. Doors were lined with leather or fur strips to block drafts, and some cabins had double-door vestibules, trapping an air pocket between the outside and the living space so that no gust could sweep directly inside. Above, the roof was built to guard against the greatest thief of all: heat rising away into the winter sky. Thick sod roofs, layered with bark, moss, leaves, and earth, created a dense, waterproof shield that kept the warmth in and the cold out. Maintenance was never-ending. Families walked the perimeter of their homes often, checking for cracks in the chinking, replacing sod patches on the roof, and replenishing insulation in the walls. Even a gap the size of a finger could create a cold spot that froze water in a cup or robbed a bed of comfort. Inside the Morrison cabin, the night passed under the quiet rhythm of a well-practiced survival system. The children slept in their shared bed, their small bodies curled beneath layers of quilts and heavy furs. At their feet, two large stones wrapped in wool blankets radiated heat absorbed from the fire hours earlier. The stones and the children's own body heat worked together to create a small pocket of warmth that would last until morning. This was no casual comfort. It was a deliberate, carefully engineered microclimate designed to keep them safe from hypothermia while the outside world froze solid. Frontier families knew that warmth was not only a matter of heating the space, it was about preserving the heat the body already made. Clothing was as critical as the fire itself. They wore layer upon layer, starting with linen or wool against the skin, followed by thicker wool shirts, vests, and outer garments. Each layer trapped air, forming invisible walls that slowed the escape of heat. Wool was treasured for its ability to insulate even when damp, and sheep were raised specifically for its production. The women of the family worked tirelessly through summer and autumn, spinning, weaving, and knitting garments that might take months to complete, but could mean the difference between life and death when winter closed its fist. The heated stone system was one of the frontier's quiet marvels. By heating stones until they were nearly too hot to touch, then wrapping them in layers of wool and placing them in beds, families created portable, long-lasting sources of heat. For 6 to 8 hours, these stones released their stored energy, ensuring that no one woke shivering in the blackest hours before dawn. And so the Morrison family, like many before them, lay in their small, insulated world, guarded by stone, wool, and knowledge passed down through generations. Outside, the temperature fell to 30 degrees below zero, but inside, the warmth held steady. Now, dear listener, imagine yourself there, tucked beneath thick blankets, the faint glow of embers casting shadows on the log walls. The air still and warm around you, while the wind claws uselessly at the outer walls. The fire is banked, the stones are hot, and every seam of the cabin is sealed tight. You are safe. You are warm. Let your breath slow, matching the steady heat of the stones. The night will pass quietly. The cold cannot reach you here. Some families used heated bricks or even metal tools for the same purpose as the warmed stones. Objects that could be heated by the fire during the day and then wrapped in cloth to hold heat through the long night. But the most reliable warmth came not from inanimate things, but from each other. Shared body heat was an ancient and vital survival strategy, one that required careful thought. Families slept together in the same bed, arranging themselves so that the smallest and most vulnerable were nestled between the larger, warmer bodies of the adults. It was not about comfort. It was about survival, creating a human furnace strong enough to push back the cold. The beds themselves were built for insulation, thick straw mattresses, sometimes topped with down feathers, lifted sleepers above the chill of the floor. Layers of blankets, quilts, and furs formed a thermal cocoon, trapping heat close to the skin. In some homes, the bed was built into an enclosed nook with curtains or sliding panels that could be drawn shut at night, creating a miniature warm chamber within the already insulated cabin. Warmth began long before anyone lay down to sleep. Hot soup, tea, or milk was served in the evening to raise the body's core temperature. The digestion itself became a heat source, while the warm liquid brought immediate comfort. The effect could last for hours into the night. When the cabin's warmth lagged, families turned to movement. Adults and children alike knew simple exercises they could perform even in the smallest of rooms. Slow, rhythmic calisthenics to drive blood into cold fingers and toes. Squats and stretches to wake the body's internal furnace. Children learn to wriggle their toes and move their hands beneath the blankets to prevent frostbite. Breathing techniques, though less known, were passed down in quiet instruction. Cupping warm breath into the hands or under the covers to create small pockets of heat, enough to keep fingers alive in dangerous cold. But sometimes, despite all these measures, the fire would fail. In those moments, emergency protocols became the only barrier between life and death. Thomas Morrison knew the sound of cold in the night. His youngest daughter's teeth clattering like stones in a pan. The strange stillness in the cabin air as heat slipped away. Outside, it was 40 below zero. Inside, the temperature was dropping fast. Without action, the cold would claim them before dawn. The family had trained for this. Every cabin had fire-starting materials stored in several places. Dry tinder, kindling, and tools ready to be struck into life at a moment's notice. In a small waterproof box near the hearth, birch bark and pine pitch waited, along with tufts of dried moss gathered in summer. Char cloth, made from scorched fabric, lay folded inside, material that would catch the faintest spark and blossom into flame. The procedure was exact. Clear the hearth, build a nest of tinder, strike until the ember caught, feed it gently until flame rose, then nurse it into logs that would hold. While Thomas worked the fire, Sarah began the rapid rewarming protocol. The child was stripped of her cold, damp night clothes and wrapped skin to skin against her father's chest. The two of them enveloped in dry blankets and heavy furs. The warmth of his body began the slow transfer of life back into hers. If wood had run low, they would have burned whatever they could. Chairs, shelves, even parts of the cabin itself. In the wilderness, nothing held more value than heat. And in the Morrison cabin that night, as the fire took hold once more and the child's shivers began to fade, the family knew they had beaten back the cold for another day. Now, dear listener, imagine yourself there. The flames brightening, the shadows retreating, the warmth spreading once again through the air. Outside, the night is deep and frozen. But here, within these sturdy walls, you are wrapped in layers of heat and care. The fire is steady. The air is safe to breathe. Your body is warm and your heart is calm. Let the rhythm of the fire guide your breathing, slow and even. Let the weight of the blankets and the closeness of this safe place ease every thought from your mind. The treatment for cold emergencies was never rushed. Gradual rewarming was essential. Too fast, and the body could go into dangerous shock. Warm liquids, given in slow sips, helped raise core temperature from the inside, while careful monitoring ensured that recovery stayed steady. Every action was deliberate, every moment measured. Frontier families did not gamble with the cold. They worked with it, understanding its power and respecting its dangers. Backup heating systems were always ready for the moment when the main fireplace failed. Small braziers or metal containers could burn charcoal or scraps of wood indoors. Their heat concentrated to keep a person alive until the main fire was restored. Heated metal tools, cast iron cookware, or specially made warming devices were pressed to critical areas. Hands, feet, chest, to keep frostbite from setting in. In the most desperate moments, every scrap of heat mattered. And when even that wasn't enough, families had ways to call for help. A thin ribbon of smoke from a midday fire, carefully shaped and released through the chimney, could send a signal to a neighbor's cabin miles away. Reflected light from a polished metal plate, caught by the sun, could flash across a snow-covered valley. In the silence of the wilderness, the blast of a horn or a gunshot could carry far, summoning help before the cold claimed its victims. Frontier communities understood these signals. They did not wait to debate or wonder. They came running. In such places, a neighbor's call for help was as urgent as one's own. Time itself was measured against the cold. Families knew the survival timeline by heart. At 40 degrees below zero, an unheated cabin would turn unlivable in just 2 to 3 hours. Without heat, human survival was counted in hours, not days. This truth drove the precision of every emergency plan and the discipline of every response. There was no room for hesitation. Equipment, too, was part of the ritual of survival. Fire-starting tools were checked daily. Tinder was kept bone-dry in sealed containers. Fuel reserves were inspected and rotated to ensure nothing was too damp or degraded to burn. Backup devices were tested regularly. For the moment, you learned something was broken in the wilderness. Could be the moment you lost the fight. In the words of frontier survival expert Daniel Boone, in the wilderness, you don't get a second chance to save your family from the cold. Your plan has to work the first time, every time. But no plan worked without the mind to carry it out. Panic was a silent killer, freezing thought before it froze the body. That's why even children in frontier families were trained to know their roles in an emergency. Families practiced their survival protocols until they became instinct. Movements made without pause, choices made without doubt. In the wilderness, hesitation could be fatal, but preparedness could make the difference between tragedy and a story told beside the fire. These thermal survival methods were never just about staying warm. They were about building a life within the harshest of conditions, about making heat systems that could last months without failure, using nothing more than what the land itself could provide. And though the modern world has its furnaces and thermostats, the principles remain unchanged. Knowledge saves lives, and preparation turns fear into calm. The frontier families who mastered these skills left behind more than a record of survival. They left a map of how to live with the cold without surrendering to it. And now, dear listener, as the fire in our story burns low, let your mind wander to that quiet cabin at the edge of the wilderness. The wind outside may be fierce, but here the air is still and warm. The walls are sealed, the embers glow, and the blankets rest heavy upon you. There is no urgency now, only the soft hum of safety, the slow rhythm of your own breathing, and the knowledge that everything that needs to be done has been done. Close your eyes and feel the comfort of preparedness, the deep peace of knowing that the night can pass without fear. Imagine the steady warmth wrapping around you like the walls of that cabin, holding back the cold, keeping you in a cocoon of quiet security. The storm outside is distant now. Inside, all is well. Sleep deeply, without worry, for the dawn will come, and with it, the promise of another day. Good night, my friend. Rest easy, rest warm, and let the winter pass in peace.